20 years ago, a reality TV series about a struggling promotion aired on Spike TV that, for better or worse, would go on to change the landscape of sports and pop culture. This is a retrospective of that series, its key players, and its lasting legacy. This is TUFtwenty.
TUFtwenty is brought to you by The Contrarians, a movie podcast where we are right and you're wrong. Be sure to subscribe to The Contrarians on your favorite podcatcher for access to this entire series, as well as Julio and Alex's most recent film follies. Our main website, wearethecontrarians.com, houses all of our past episodes as well.
You can find The Contrarians across social media under the handle @ContrarianPrime.
It's not just us, though. As for this 14-part journey of nostalgia and shame, we've got a championship corner.
I'm Joe Holbert, and for years I've discussed fake fighting on the internet. Now, however, I'm trying my hand at the real thing. Usually, you can find me at the Late Night Grim, but for this particular adventure, I'll be sitting under the Team Couture learning tree, providing insight to my fellow men of honor.
It's niche micro-celebrity Steve. You may know me from Twitter, the Songs with Friends podcast, or various scuffles in the world of professional wrestling. By the end of this journey, you are no doubt going to feel this, because this is the ultimate.
Now that the cage door is locked, let's get down to business.
Time to talk asparagus.
Julio, are we about to discuss the first Ultimate Fighting Championship bout you've ever watched?
That I've watched with my
knowingly
full attention. Yeah, I mean, it's been playing in the background several times whenever I've been to your place and you've been having a combat sports party, but I guess this is one where... Okay, more importantly, Alex, not counting like Here Comes the Boom and...
Damn it, that was going to be my joke. I was going to say, excluding, of course, Scott Voss versus whatever the fuck they call Krzysztof Sosinski in that movie.
And Warrior, I mean...
Oh, yes, where Kurt Angle's Fedor and does a power bomb from the pro wrestling position. Great stuff.
Not counting movies, this is the first time I think that I've been invested in the outcome. So I think that makes it more memorable.
And I'd wager to bet that this is your first exposure to the idea of weight cutting and what that is, correct?
Yes. My first question here is are they making this up? That's really what happened.
We'll circle back to that, but
it doesn't seem very healthy. I'll tell you that.
You've seen Foxcatcher, right?
A long time ago.
That's one of the more pivotal scenes in that, when Mark Ruffalo has to help Channing Tatum make weight. But we'll get there. Bobby Southworth has 30 pounds to cut in 24 hours. So, Steve, how you doing today, sir?
Very good, sir. A beautiful day here in the Kentucky. I know that people can't see us on the video, but I got a lovely stream of some sort happening behind me on Skype, really helping setting the mood for the serenity that is the Ultimate Fighter.
Joey, how are things on the other side of the world?
They couldn't be better. I get a chance to discuss Bobby Southworth in 2024. This is, I'm pretty sure this is the dream. I think it's mine anyway. I don't know.
Tremendous. We're here for episode 3, Making Weight, airing on January 31st of 2005. To bring us up to speed here, episodes 1 and 2. No fights so far, but we have had 2 eliminations. Jason Strangebrew Thacker and Chris Sanford been sent home. And one more will be knocked off by the end of this episode in their quest to become the Ultimate Fighter. January 31st of 2005. Julio, what's in the cinema? What's playing? What's at the top of the list? Is Coach Carter still hanging on?
Man, Coach Carter's not even in the top 5.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
How the mighty have fallen.
Sam Jackson move on to the next thing. He didn't care. No, we had a lot of new contenders, so let's see if you can guess who made it to the top. Alex, January 28th, we had Hide and Seek. It's a horror/thriller with Robert De Niro and Dakota Fanning.
My God.
We have Alone in the Dark, which, if I'm not mistaken, stars Christian Slater. It's an adaptation of the game. $1 Million Baby. Was that a January release? No, that has to be an expansion for the awards.
Yeah.
Which, it ended up racking up quite a few. Aliens of the Deep, worth mentioning because it's your boy James Cameron playing with 3D and going underwater. So, setting the stage.
I was about to say, how'd that work out for him?
Yeah. And then just as a side note, apparently it was Raging Bull's 25th anniversary, so they re-released it. And I can tell you already, it did not make the top 5. So which one do you think made it to number 1? Or was it one of the previous entries? Are We There Yet? In Good Company, Meet the Fockers, Assault on Precinct 13?
I would like to think Are We There Yet retains box office supremacy. But yeah, if $1 Million Baby, that would have been Probably re-released after it won Best Picture, right?
No, this January. The Oscars haven't happened yet.
Well, shit then. I don't know. It's definitely not the Uwe Boll movie. I'll tell you that right now. Don't leave us hanging, Julio. What was it?
Okay, well, if you're going to take another step. Number one, well, I'll tell you from number 5, it's not the movies we'll be talking about. I guess The Aviator got re-released as well, or expanded. 9 million. Meet the Fockers is still there at number 4 with 10 million. $1 Million Baby made it to 3rd with 16 million. Are We There Yet? Sadly, number 2. Ice Cube couldn't hold on to number 1, 18 million. And then number 1, Hide and Seek. Do Not Mess with Robert De Niro. He's in 2 spots in the top 5. He's a fucker, and he is a concerned dad that thinks his daughter may be a serial killer.
My God.
It's quite a movie, Hide and Seek. A really shitty twist ending.
It's got Elizabeth Shue, Famke Janssen. My God.
Hamlet 2, so Elizabeth Shue, yes.
It's a horror movie, so is there a part where De Niro says, "Boo"? Does that happen at all in the movie?
No, but if I'm not mistaken, he is dating Famke Janssen in that movie.
Get it, Bob? Is there a
big X-Men fan?
A wholly unnecessary sex scene like in what's the Pacino movie we did?
Righteous Kill?
Yes. You want to see De Niro getting down with Carla Gugino? That's the one to watch.
It's 5 seconds, but it makes an impression.
It certainly does. It feels like cutting 20 pounds. So Steve injected a bit of trivia for us on our previous episode. We've given us a bit of a history lesson on Willa Ford. So that spawned, that gave me the idea of we should just have Steve do a segment like Julio does here, discussing what was at the top of the music charts at the time of the airing of the episode we're covering, the episode du jour. So again, January 31st, 2005, Making Weight, the episode 3 of The Ultimate Fighter, the first season. Steve, what were the kids listening to? Would the iPod have been out yet?
Yes, the iPod would have been out. Not in my house, because I wasn't one of those people. But yes, if you wanted someone to rob, just look for a white earbud string coming down, and you could make yourself a quick lick. In that iPod, you'll probably find the top 5 songs for the Billboard Hot 100 week of January 29th, 2005. Number 5, Snoop Dogg and Pharrell, Drop It Like It's Hot, which was all the rage in every middle school dance of the day.
Absolutely.
Number 4, Destiny's Child, Soldier, which I did not remember that Destiny's Child had a little comeback loop after Beyonce had already hit.
That was cashing in on the exposure that Kelly Rowland got for Freddy vs. Jason.
I no doubt there's a tie-in there. Number 3, Lil Jon featuring Usher and Ludacris, Lovers and Friends. Number 2, Sierra and Missy Elliott with 1-2 Step. And the number 1 song, which I looked ahead a little bit and was very shocked, appalled, and disappointed with the youth of 2005 of the hold that Mario's Let Me Love You had on the Billboard Hot 100. For a little bit of a spoiler alert, we're not going to get away from this song for a long time, boys. so throw it in your music, your Spotify, your Apple Music, whatever it is that you use. Get familiar, because we may have to add a Let Me Love You lyric breakdown segment at some point. That's how long this song is going to be with us.
We'll have to find the correct episode that it'll correspond with, but I think that sounds like a plan. On that Monday night leading into The Ultimate Fighter, the World Wrestling Federation presented their flagship show, Monday Night Raw. It was actually the night after the 2005 Royal Rumble. Joey, do you recall who won that?
That would be the infamous torn quad gate business, wouldn't it? 2005, where a shamed Netflix subject sat in center ring as 2 future Hollywood stars debated who had won, ultimately for, of course, Dave Bautista to win that particular duel.
Julio, the Royal Rumble's the one where you have to throw them over the top rope. You know, there's like 30 guys. Only one man can go to WrestleMania, the main event of WrestleMania. Thank you. And it came down to Batista and John Cena, and there was like a legitimate botch in which they both fell over and hit the ground at the same time. Batista's talked about it. If like they planned to do that, they couldn't have pulled it off that perfectly. And then the because he's definitely one of one, Vince McMahon comes storming out to try to like make sense of it. And as he slides into the ring, his legs bang the apron and he tears both of his quads. He tries to stand up and can't. So he's just sitting on his ass in his suit in the middle of the ring. Yeah. And he's just yelling instructions at Batista and John Cena. It's a pretty surreal scene, to say the least.
Is this on the Netflix documentary?
It gets a whole episode. I don't know, but one of the other things Batista said about it, he's like, "Who tears both quads?" That's something that only Vince could do. So definitely.
My understanding was that he hurt the first one sliding into the ring. He banged it against the apron, and then in trying not to sell it for the boys walking back, he tore the other one just marching down the aisle to not show weakness.
Definitely not a sign of steroid abuse or anything like that.
And a quick note on that Rumble 05 show, I watched that on WWE.com. Did not realize until after I placed the order that my DSL internet was not sufficient. So I paid full price to watch every fourth frame for 3 hours.
If I remember correctly, too, that's the one where they did the Triple H Orton match that has aged very well, where the storyline of the match is Orton's concussed to hell and can't do anything. I mean, we're here talking about Chuck Liddell and his speech pattern from 20 years ago versus today, so has aged tremendously. Monday Night Raw. Shelton Benjamin defeats Simon Dean to retain the WWE Intercontinental Championship in 123. Barn burner there. Maven defeats the Hurricane. Heel Maven defeats the Hurricane at 249. La Resistance. Robert Conway, future NWA heavyweight champion, and Sylvain Grenier defeated Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho. Oh, excuse me. It ended in a double countout. So La Resistance retained the tag titles. Because why not? Muhammad Hassan defeats Sergeant Slaughter in 220. Randy Orton and Shawn Michaels defeat Ric Flair and Triple H in 16 minutes. That was probably pretty good. And to pay off their no contest before the debut of the Ultimate Fighter, Kane finally defeats Gene Snitsky in a steel cage match in 6:45. So a main event anywhere in the country. Julio Muhammad Hassan was Vince McMahon's answer to post 9/11 America. He made a terrorist character, and I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's the only time they had to legitimately kill off a character because the network was going to throw him off. So, USA.
Listen, you don't get anywhere. You're not swinging. So,
good answer. That's why I always tell NXT when he's coming after the old terrorist gimmick. I say, hey, take it easy. You got to take swings in this business, kid. It is what it is.
So we got our recap here to kick off the Ultimate Fighter previously. One thing I did not notice in the log challenge we discussed, they branded the log. It had a UFC logo on it because branding, pal. I messed up the time frame. I said 8 weeks, and it was actually 6 weeks because we're 13 days in, and they mentioned that there's 4 weeks to go, so 6 weeks. And we start with what the theme of this episode is going to be, is about cutting weight. There's also a bit of controversy here to begin episode 3 in that, Joe, it definitely appears that all these guys were told different things about how this show was going to work out.
Yeah, I think this season, and honestly just this general concept, is best explained by the quote I have in front of me here, which is, this is from Dana White, our fearless leader, who said, "We got some issues. These guys are going to have to start fighting soon." Which I think... I mean, perhaps I misunderstood the show. He appears to have. The fighters do. There's been, I assume, intentional miscommunication, and the guys seem to think that they're going to do a reality show, and then the final is they have fights.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, this is even funnier in hindsight, because the show ultimately would settle into there's a fight on every single episode, and eventually there'd be 10 fights in the first episode.
Yeah.
But that's a real quote the president of the UFC says, and he's alarmed they're not cutting weight already, and at one point, Bobby Southwell, we're going to talk about his struggles with weight. He says, he's the only one who has the guts to say it. But he's like, we thought we were going to be fighting the final. And everyone kind of nods. Dana's like, I will not respond to that, for I will just simply explain that you should be more tough.
And you should be thankful.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. You hear Forrest in the background. Bobby said, they go, yeah, that was my understanding too.
Yeah.
And is it Lieben that pipes up? He's like, we didn't know we weren't going to get paid for this. And that's a big part of it. Dana White says in this episode something that he would become very comfortable saying, you're not getting paid for this, right? So tension filled to begin with. And I think when the episode starts, spoiler alert, we get to Bobby Southworth fighting Ludinson Cade at the end of this episode. Bobby's at 2:30. It would become a theme throughout later seasons. There's infamously, Gabe Rudiger, Julio. There's characters throughout the show that don't take it seriously and have really bad struggles with weight cutting.
Don't we all?
Yes.
So the show's called The Ultimate Fighter, right? And these guys show up presumably as prospective Ultimate Fighters, and they don't have this idea that they're going to fight. Julio, who we've established, knows next to nothing about this world. Put it together on his own on a recent show that there would be expected fights in the house. Yet these men who show up and train for 2-a-days for 3 hours a day just assume they're going to be sawing logs and carrying chairs for the next 6 weeks.
Bobby at one point is like, he's like, I'm the heaviest. I'm definitely the fattest. And he says it without any, there's no humour to the way he delivers it, which captures the concern that's emerging. It's a strange deal. The way it's presented is bizarre, and the fighter's mindset is even strange. I have no clue. No idea.
It's off of that where he's talking about I need to start cutting that we zip over, one of those swipe fades to the house, and there's a voiceover of Chris Lieben going, "These are New York steaks," and then they proceed to show ribeyes on the grill. And then there's like some smash cuts of one guy eating a steak that looks like it maybe understood the concept of fire, that it was just bloody and raw, and then one of them has like Caesar dressing they're putting on their salad. These are fucking animals here. Steve, do you think any of these guys could cook?
One of them knew how to turn on a stove. And then from there, they just kind of figured out what they wanted to do with their lives for those couple weeks. Yeah, it was just an absolute disaster in that kitchen.
You don't think Diego knows how to cook healthy?
He doesn't know what asparagus is. I wouldn't be trusting his abilities in the kitchen.
I trust that any of them can operate a blender or a Vitamix very well. But as far as actual cooking of edible real food, no, absolutely not. I don't trust most of these guys can read.
So they get called back to the Ultimate Fighting Institute that night. And for those who are even vaguely familiar with the Ultimate Fighter or Dana White, this is like his X7. This is his Normandy, or whatever expression you want to use, something he will be most known for when the time comes. His best supporting clip playing here, where first of all, when they get in the gym, he goes, "Gather around, get close." He brings them in, and then he starts yelling at them. But the punchline, of course, being, "Do you want to be a fucking fighter?" And then teacher's pet, not even a split second later, Bobby goes, "That's why I'm here." Julio, were you moved by Dana White's speech here? Because this is basically... we talked about in the first couple episodes, he's still kind of timid, but this is basically all he does now is just yell and say fuck and stuff like that. So
be inspiring.
For some people, jokes aside, he's convinced a generation of fighters that they don't deserve to get paid for putting their lives on the line. Would it shock you to learn that this man is a raging Trump supporter?
Oh, no.
Ruins your whole image, right?
It doesn't shock me. It just disappoints me.
He spoke at the RNC this year.
God, just this type of speech? Was he like, do you want to be the ultimate Republicans?
Do you want to be a fucking democracy? That's what he asked the attendants.
Now, I was so distracted during this whole thing because Loden Kincaid with his bandana looked like Prison Mike from The Office.
That's strong. That's actually a good call. That explains why I was looking at him so much of confusion. Okay, that makes sense.
Before this, as the guys were kind of reconciling that they would have to cut weight, Chuck, being the masterful coach that he is, his game plan is no more Gatorade and the fat guys are coming to the gym at 8 o'clock.
I mean, that's step one. And then you just fine tune from there. To answer about Dana White, like in a more serious matter, it was surprising that big show of personality, so to speak, after him not making much of an impression in the first 2 episodes. And I don't know if it's that he watched the dailies and he's like, oh no, I need to make more of a, I need to be more of a presence because I'm the lead guy here. So give me a moment, which leads to what actually is my first note. Because I think the first thing that the episode does is open with him and the 2 coaches talking. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, is this banter scripted or are they really just shoot the shit like this? And do you guys think that his speech is like, did he like write it down? Did he have like, some people massage it? So is this like the best version of what he thinks his speech is going to be? Or is he winging it as he comes out and he's like, I'm just going to yell at them? And
it's interesting because this was definitely a deliberate part of the UFC's branding. Like Dana was very much central in that kind of, another one that he establishes through this show and kind of makes a point of is like, don't let go of the scorecards, which suggests that if you go to the decision, you're like a pussy, like it's another Dana thing that he kind of used this platform. So I think it's probably a case of he run this speech through his head a couple thousand times, and that was the moment, right? And as Alex said, through the years, his delivery got more and more kind of volatile. And now he's intolerable entirely. But I don't know. I'd be intrigued as to the process, but it definitely is deliberate that he gets this chance to I'll show him the real ways of the men of the UFC. And that's it. Here he is doing that.
Do you think the opening is staged though? Like when it's just him and Liddell and...
It has to be.
You think so?
I mean, that conversation, no one's ever had a conversation like that before in the history of the world, right?
Yeah, I think they give them like an idea with all reality TV. It's like, hey, this is what we're going to do here. I think it's loosely scripted because you've seen The Expendables. Randy's not that good of an actor. So I think
that was my counter argument.
Yeah, true. They definitely added some audio in post too. Some of Dana's audio was definitely not the first time because Chuck and Randy are just sitting there still and they add in this extra part about the weight cuts and the weight class. And yeah, there's a few moments like that. The editing is not world class, and it's fair to say.
Brother, our poor host here, Willa Ford, man, is like all ADR.
Ooh.
They can't even match up her voice to her. I don't know if she had problem reading the instructions or remembering what to do, because we're going to get to this next challenge. I would not know how to explain what these fellas do here.
That's the thing. Yeah, I think it's more likely that they in post realized they didn't know how to explain what this was to begin with. So they just they got to do it afterwards, I think, because this stuff's ridiculous.
And on top of that, Willa Ford's mission statement is that she wants to be bad. So she deliberately is bad every single time she's on camera for the entirety of the season.
We're seeing her less and less, and I would imagine it's because those fucking cavemen are all cramped up in that house together, and they see a woman, and I can't imagine they weren't just oogling her. They seem like all well-mannered men, so who knows. Our next challenge is here. Steve, walk us through what these fuckers do in the desert with kayaks.
All right, let's see. The kayak challenge, I called it. They dragged themselves via a string across the desert to a finish line, and then they had to pick up 10-pound weight plates and carry them in a bucket across. Wasn't it like they were running like suicides circa like Coach Carter? They would run 10 feet, grab a plate, run it back to the bucket, run 20 feet, bring another one back until they filled the bucket, and then had to carry the bucket full of plates across the finish line. Bobby Southworth is already cutting weight by this point.
Yeah,
and we almost had an Evan Tanner situation in the desert.
Jesus. Yeah, we talked about this already, and it's going to come back up. It's not surprising that this formula didn't last, and they're lucky that Bobby didn't die or go to the emergency room here. He's so done. He's again. I think I made this reference about Chris Sanford the last one. It's 3:00 in the afternoon, the Friday before Christmas break. That's like the effort level he's giving here. But Joe, what does any of this have to do with fighting? We just got the "Do you want to be a fucking fighter" speech, and then he should have followed up. All right, now get in the van. We're going out to the desert to do some kayaking.
To that point, this is Dana's actual Oscar moment. The speech is it's a red herring, because this is where he, as a man who is cutting like 30 pounds, struggles in the desert to move around buckets and kayaks and such. This is where Dana concludes, well, that's why I didn't make it to the big leagues. No heart. Gutless. Coward. And Chuck Liddell, Chuck is, he doesn't seem to be the most developed in this regard. So I have no, it's not surprising me that his take is just like, oh, man up, that's whatever, it's Chuck Liddell. Yeah. But Dana being with him and being like, damn right, Chuck, what an absolute coward this guy is, huh? How does he have the confidence to speak this way about these dudes? It's insane. But to me, this is his most, he's like, that just shows you, hasn't got it. Because he couldn't carry buckets around in the desert.
Dana also wearing a long sleeve button up in the middle of the desert. Chuck, we're on Chuck Fit Watch again. He's got the blue jersey, camo shorts, and flip flops. And his gait is just getting wider and wider. At this point, his stance is wider than his shoulders are when he just stands there. Just watching him is a treat. His motions and mannerisms. But yeah, he's pissed. Alex Schonauer wins the challenge here, which I believe we get a talking head of, I believe it's Koscheck, who says he obviously doesn't want to fight because we haven't seen him move that fast the entire time he's been here.
Yeah, it was Mike Quick-Swick thought that Alex that he won because he's a coward who doesn't want to fight.
Which, I mean, that feels like a metaphor for this whole thing, right? Like, this loser, he actually won the challenge. Nerd. I'm trying to fight over here, you know?
Bobby taking breaks along the way. He's just pouring sweat. And he just, he has to take a break. I was getting tired watching this, and he's like, hunches over, puts his hands on his knees, and Koscheck and Chuck are just swearing at him. Like, come on, fucking kick it in the ass. And then, it leads to Chuck Liddell and Dana having a discussion about he sucks. He sucks shit.
Now, when this is happening, does it make you guys, as the audience, root for him, or do you lose respect for him just seeing that he's not trying? Because the way that the show frames it is like, oh, this guy's just not pulling his weight. Or were you guys as the audience?
Like this rewatch, and especially, we're having fun, and obviously that I would literally die if I tried to do this shit. But it's more interesting to me because this is the first time I've looked at it from the idea of like these guys didn't know they were going to have to. Some of them didn't know they were going to have to cut weight, and like Joe said, they thought they were just going to do survivor tricks, and then we'll fight at the end. So this go around, it's more funny to me. I'll throw it back to the peanut gallery here. I personally don't really find myself rooting for anybody this viewing, but I guess it emboldens him because it does show that like people are doubting him.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I don't know. He's again, Chuck is whatever. Chuck can say what he wants to say. I mean, that's fine. But the Dana part definitely makes me lean in the direction of like, oh, I hope Bobby does good, But the challenges are them being so extreme is hilarious, and also it is worth bringing up because you mentioned him, Alex, and this is probably the start of a theme that's emerging here. This is where we begin to get the Captain Koscheck plot line of our program, as he just is in every scene next to Chuck, like, yeah, tell him about it, Chuck. Get on him.
With losing this challenge comes the burden of Bobby Southworth has to fight. They come together to make a decision. There's a really good moment where the green team is pontificating who he's going to pick. And one of them offers, maybe he'll call all of us out. And then Ludens and Cade goes, what, to carry him to the van? I thought that was actually really funny. But Steve, when the time comes, Bobby Southworth chooses Ludens and Cade to fight. And brother Luden looks fucking terrified.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He does.
Thank you.
He knows he's in deep waters here, and also Dana was present for this, and he was dressed like Cam from Modern Family. Just an egregious fit. So Loden is what in most circles from this point forward, he would probably be fighting as a middleweight.
Yeah.
No effort whatsoever. He's underweight when the time comes. Meanwhile, Bobby, at the beginning of this show, said he's about 230. It is going to need to cut weight. So I think Loden realizes, A, he's not that great of a fighter, but also he's going to be fighting a naturally much larger and more powerful man. So I think he knows what we all know, is that he's on the verge of getting his shit just absolutely wrecked in no time.
Julio, there's a talking head of Luden where he goes, I can't get the smile off my face. And I've never seen someone tell a more bold lie on national television until the presidential race about 8 years ago.
I thought I was being gaslit, Alex, because everything, it's not just him. Everybody is talking about it like it's going to be a fair fight and like it's going to be this awesome clash of the Titans. In fact, they're giving him the edge because Bobby has gone through the weight cutting. Well, at the time, they don't know even if he's going to make it, but they're like, he's not in good shape. So, and Loden's a great fighter. Like Couture keeps saying like, oh yeah, this is one of my top guys. He's going to win. And I thought, okay, so I guess I'm just misjudging, like as far as like the mass, right? And then the talking heads where he's just talking so much shit and he's trying to sound so confident. And I kept thinking, he looks like he's terrified. I was like, maybe I'm just misreading his facial expression. So I'm glad that it's not just me. I'm glad that across the board we agree that he looks like he's in a panic. Yeah, this made me want Bobby to win Like this was a turning point. Like the challenge, I didn't really care. But once there was this guy that was obviously scared and talking shit about the guy that needs to lose weight, and the guy that needs to lose weight was going through hell to lose weight, or I guess to cut weight.
Thank you.
I was like, all right, I know who I'm rooting for. I want Bobby to prevail and get London out of here.
Are you finding yourself as engaged in this episode without the constant Chris Lieben factor, or are you missing someone to hate at this point?
Well, I mean, London took that place. He's not hateable the way that Levin is hateable. But I was like, all right, there's an antagonist I can root against. And he's still there. I knew that he was going to eventually shoot his mouth about something else, about how he should have been the one fighting, or he would beat whoever was picked from the other team. So.
There's a cut. It's in this or like the next episode where he's just drinking again, and it's not like acknowledged after he said like, no more drinking, and they cut to him. I think it's the next episode where he's talking shit to Koscheck. He's just got like a beer in his hand and, a big chaw in his mouth. The ultimate fighter, the bear witness to the fitness of the modern warrior. All right, Julio. So this is where basically the rest of this episode becomes the Bobby Southworth is cutting weight episode. And
the passion of the Bobby.
So you didn't recall that scene in Foxcatcher. That was about the only thing I could think about that you may have experienced the idea of like someone having to cut weight. So sounds like you weren't familiar with the idea of fighters and wrestlers doing this prior to watching this.
I'm still not sure I am. I don't understand how it makes sense. Like they're just trying to meet a number, but for no reason, because if I understood correctly, after you meet that number, they give you a day to gain the weight back. I mean, not necessarily, but he says, right, like it seems like it's all for optics. Like, does it really make that much of a difference? Is like, how much weight does he end up losing? I don't remember. Like, he was at 230 and he
does like, 230 and he ends up at 205. So a lot. And then,
I mean, that is...
You would presume he gets in the cage at probably 220, probably at least, I'd imagine he's back up to. So that's why it's such a big factor, is because they'll call them weight bullies, which is like some guys are so proficient at cutting weight that they can basically be truly from a weight class above. They just get down for that 5 minutes to weigh in. It's a scary thing. Yeah.
But that doesn't make any sense, right? Like, shouldn't they weigh them right before the match starts? Like, if that's what your weight's supposed to be.
Back in the olden days, you would weigh in before the fight. The issue is, because fighters are insane, they would still do the weight cut part to try and get an advantage. And then you've got serious health problems. So now this is basically, the reason it is the way it is now is basically these guys are insane. They're going to cut weight regardless. Let's give them a day to rehydrate in order to do so.
Yeah, it's
just a circus.
It stems from like amateur wrestling, in the Olympics. The idea, short of heavyweight, is exactly what Joey was describing, that you cut down to meet a weight that you've agreed upon, with the idea of like getting back to Thiago Alves. It was a fighter in the UFC, ended up fighting for a world title once. It was a great example of, he would make 170. Well, when he made weight, he would make 170. And then by the time he fought the next day, would be over 200 pounds. So he had like a side. And Joe, you remember how massive he was in his prime?
Guys are trying to take him down. His strength. Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Just manhandled Matt Hughes, like when Hughes was still relevant. So that's the idea behind it. Now, obviously, what we see here, there's a part where Bobby's like, my kidneys. And so obviously there's health concerns here. You do have one really famous example of Frankie Edgar, who's a legitimate MMA Hall of Famer. He fought just at the weight he walked around at. He would have to cut maybe, 10 pounds, if that. And he had a very long and prosperous career. So I see your point, and it is refreshing to hear an outside perspective of this stuff. Me and, Steve and Joe watch this just like, yeah, that's right. And Julio's like, these guys are fucking morons. What are they doing? So
yeah.
I remember they were, before The Ultimate Fighter started airing, they would air this as part of the commercial.
Oh, shit.
The quote of, you can lose 20 pounds in 24 hours. You're a man. And I remember back then, I was, not quite 23 years old, just rolling my eyes, because I know that this will be the first exposure to UFC for a lot of people, and that they would react like Julio has here. Like, what dumbass marks? Why would they do this? This is idiotic. You're proving nothing.
I can just hear the honky tonk man. Anyone who cuts 20 pounds in 24 hours is a fucking mark. That's what he would say. we get some hilarious visuals here of Chuck literally like leaning and sitting against the door, like preventing Bobby from getting out of the sauna. He's got, a sweatsuit on, the what they call those, I guess it's a sweatsuit, the plastic wraps that you put on to help you cut weight. He's running in the he's working the treadmill, the elliptical bike in the sauna. And then like Joe called out, Koscheck's here, just kind of, Koscheck on this season was easily the most accomplished amateur wrestler. And so he definitely was familiar with the idea of weight cutting, and he's just there. It starts with him cheering him on to then him like basically calling him a pussy and talking shit to him. And then in the end, he literally drags him by the legs and throws him back into the sauna. There's some definite scenes here. Julio, the weight cutting thing it can be a huge part of like the story of a fight. If a guy looks bad on the scale, he looks drawn. The last time Conor McGregor fought at 145 pounds, he looked like a skeleton. Like he had these glasses on that looked like they were just hanging off of a skull.
Was this before or after Roadhouse?
Long before.
A different time. Very, very different. A distant memory.
But Joe, there's some pretty famous cases of weight cutting affecting not only performances, but like fights have been called off because of bad weight cuts.
They have. The most famous one that immediately came to mind for me was one of many reasons that Khabib and Tony Ferguson never fought, right? They had they had that fight booked maybe 6 times, 5 or 6 times. It never happened. And one of the times was Khabib fell ill cutting weight. I did some brief research on what the presumed weight cut was for Khabib Nurmagomedov, and he supposedly would walk around at 200 pounds.
Jesus.
He would fight at 155, Julio, to give you an example of.
God.
Now, styles is another part like of weight cutting. Is some guys who are more like Frankie Edgar was very quick. It wasn't saying that he needed to do. Khabib was a guy who would grab a hold of you. So if he could get down to that weight for 5 minutes to weigh in and then go straight back up, the strength advantage he would have would be absurd. A couple weight cuts that did not go so well that immediately came to mind, noted down. Rumble Johnson, who ultimately would become famous as a 205-pounder and would even fight at heavyweight, he used to fight as low as 170, which was frightening to look at. When he would get on the scale, it was terrifying. And as soon as his body just decided it couldn't do that anymore, he moved up to 185, and he missed weight so badly that he weighed in at 197 for a 185-pound fight. So you can imagine the surprise of the opponent there. Another one like that was Kelvin Gastelum, who weighed in at 180 for a 170 fight. So
he's
it does
missed weight
happen
several times, I believe.
Yeah, he's missed weight a lot, and it does happen. It's always, as Alex said, it's kind of, for fight freaks, as insane as it is and as weird as it is to say, it's like a part of the event. Like, how will the guys look on the scale? It's a real thing. And even at heavyweight, where they don't have to make a weight, then it becomes about like, are they lighter than usual? Are they heavier than usual? They look soft at the weight? Do they look? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, and that's not even without getting into like the face-off part that is like total theatre nonsense. But these are the games we play. This is the combat sport game.
So Julio, when they make, like, let's say, you're off if, you saw here, Bobby, steps on the scale stark naked. That's something that they do pretty regularly. We just had a case this weekend of a fighter missing weight, the insane Alien Perez, who then got on the scale when she tried to lose the additional weight and was like trembling uncontrollably, to which she and her coach said that was a tactic to get in her opponent's head. It's like, all right. On commentary yesterday, Paul Felder goes, so did she miss weight on purpose? And a big part of that, Julio, is if you miss weight, you lose 20% of your purse. So that's a big, obviously, incentive to not miss weight. And your opponent, much like is the quandaries presented in this episode, your opponent can decline to fight you if you don't make weight because you're not meeting what you signed a contract for.
So here, the first time Bobby misses weight, so did he lose 20% of nothing?
Dana taxed him on it. So that happens regularly now where fighters, they have this box they bring out for you to get naked in and then step on the scale. There's tricks. God bless him, Daniel Cormier. It appeared in one of his fights cheated by he was naked and there was a towel and people were holding a towel up and he put his hands on it and kind of relieved some of the weight off of him. John Fitch used to do this thing where he got on the scale and would kind of lean back and try to just step on the ball of one of his feet to try to, because it's, it's a manual scale. It's not digital. So there's these alleged tricks of the trade that folks can execute to try to give them an advantage. One of the worst weight cut fails I've ever seen was Jason Mayhem Miller, which that guy kind of lost his mind. He missed weight by like 25 pounds, and then he stepped off the scale and took his shorts off like that was why he missed weight by 25 pounds. And then he got back on.
Was that like his like alleged attempt at a comeback fight in Europe or something, Alex, was it not? Yeah.
Part of the game. It's these are the games we play, as Joe said, and not even getting in too far. There's been some horrific weight cuts that we've seen in the past few years with the female fighters. So the weight cut we're talking about right now, Steve, Bobby Southworth is not doing well, but his team is basically forcing him to make weight. In later seasons, we'll see people just give up on guys trying to cut weight, but Bobby couldn't have done this on his own.
Assistant coach Koscheck is really, he said, motivationally speaking to him to try to get him going. They're literally dragging him around on the floor of this gym to get him back in. He's working out on the bike, but in the air conditioning. And the whole point of cutting weight is that you're pulling sweat and water out of your body. So it's too cold, it's not going to work. So they cut to Loden at the house playing pool and having himself a good old time. And then they cut back to Bobby, and he's dragging his anus on the ground like a dog.
What he needed Jason Thacker to grab a hold of him and go, shoulders up, chin high, be a warrior, son. If he was there, he'd have jumped back in that sauna. It would have been easy.
So in the midst of all this, Dana shows up to see how things are going. And he finds Bobby just laying on the floor, not even trying anymore. Sweat pouring out of his forehead in his rubber suit.
He's laying on the floor like the concrete. Or no, it's in the front office, but he's laying on the floor like a fucking kid in elementary school, like taking a nap. And he's just like, Dana, can I be a little over? Can I be a little over? And Dana does like the ask your mom thing. He's like, I don't know. I'll have to ask the commission. The funniest part of this weight cut is it appears to be a public gym because there's people whose faces are blurred out in the background.
Yeah, I was confused by that. That would make sense. Yeah, this was Koscheck's presence is not even really like elaborated on in the show's edit. He's just there the entire time, which makes it even funnier.
Yeah, he becomes Deputy Koscheck. And I was wondering, okay, so it makes sense if you explained that he actually had the most experience, I guess, at cutting weight. Is that what you said? That because of his wrestling background?
I would assume so. Joe, do you think there's anyone else? Koscheck was the most accomplished wrestler on this season, right?
Yeah, has to be. Yeah, I think because it's kind of he's like the way they define him as a character in the first couple of episodes, right? He's the wrestler kid. Like he has to be the most accomplished. Yeah.
I mean, good. We needed a sympathetic, somewhat semi-sympathetic hand there to help Bobby. Because he's not getting it from everybody else in his team. Everybody else in his team seems pretty disinterested in whether he makes it or not. I don't know if it's after the first weigh-in or right before when they're like at the gym and Couture and Ludin are talking. That's where like the stark contrast between Ludin being terrified about this Ludin is terrified about this and Couture seems to be like enjoying it, where he's like, I'm gonna have some fun.
So you try to convince, right?
Well, they go to Randy and like, all right, he wants you to spot the weight. Will you do it? And Randy's like, man, you're a nice guy, but I wouldn't do it. Fuck him. If he dies, he dies.
Which I agree with. Randy's like, right. He's like, fuck
he's
that. He's
totally right. Yeah, like,
yes.
Bobby's way too big to fight Loden to begin with. Letting him come in at like 210 would have been. But it is the fact that we have to pretend there's any doubt that Loden's going to make him cut this. Loden was hoping he was going to miss weight so bad, dude. You can see it in his face.
His eyes are just the size of saucers from the time the fight's announced, and he's just watching Bobby hobble over to the scale. Joe, did you pop for Mark Ratner? I
did indeed, yes. And he gets like a formal introduction with a nameplate and the whole deal.
And he's just like, all right, let's see where we're at. And Bobby is over. He has 2 hours to make the weight. He goes back. They're back at the gym again, and there's just like bouts of random swearing. Like he's in the sauna, and Chuck's like, "No, we got to stay in there." And he just fuck, God. Like he's just yelling random obscenities. And Koss is there, and they're both laughing, having a good time at this. And like I said, Chuck literally sits down in front of the door so Bobby can't escape. But he ends up making weight. Begins to rehydrate. Yeah, that's part of it too, Julio. Every fighter has a different system of recovering after cutting weight. It's definitely not advisable to start chugging water, so Bobby's doing the right thing here. Rich Franklin, I don't know why this has always stuck with me, but Rich Franklin's thing was 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and Pedialyte. He said your body's just in like such confusion after cutting weight that if you the PB&J, like all the preservatives in it, just kind of help balance it out. And he was world champion, so who am I to question him?
Alex, have you read the Forrest Griffin book?
I have not. I remember he referred to it as like a 3-shitter book.
It's very entertaining, and I'm sure you can find it at a library by now. But he talked about what you don't want to do is rehydrate too fast with a bunch of fruits because you will shit your pants as soon as you get kicked in the abdomen, and that he certainly does not know that from experience.
It should be. I mean, whatever Bobby did with the slow rehydration, it worked because it culminates with that scene with the doctor. Where the doctor's like, he's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with Bobby's health. He's in great health. Checked him, nothing wrong with him, Dana. And Dana goes, oh, I know. Like his he's in on it. Like, he didn't fool me. That was funny.
Was that the Margaret Goodman cameo?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
They like introduced her as like, basically it was the show's way of saying, it might look like these guys are going to die, but trust us, we take care of them. And then the payoff on that is Dana being like, he had more weight to cut. He's fine. He's really an 85er. He'll be fine.
No animals were harmed in the making of this reality show.
The night before the fight at the house, Steve will get this reference. Luden is like Bill Dauterive when the flood's coming. He just like is giving away all his things and just accepts that he's about to die. Like there was one step short of just laying on the bed, with his arms crossed. But he's like giving his shit away. He's like, yard sale. Like he knows he's going to lose this fight. And so it is fight day. As I said, Dana tells Bobby, you're not getting paid for this, right? But then unleashes the bombshell that if he finishes with a knockout submission or if the ref calls it, they get $5,000, which is a very funny amount of money. And I don't know what these guys get paid now for finishing on The Ultimate Fighter. If they do, Julio, the incentive in the UFC is getting finishes. They give out bonuses for fight of the night, knockout of the night, submission of the night, et cetera, et cetera. I believe they're up to $50,000 at this point, which is a lot of money for you or I. But again, we're talking about a company that sold for $4 billion and is constantly doing multi-million-dollar gates. A part of the story that I'll eventually circle back throughout this is that there's a ever-present controversy with the UFC about how much they pay their fighters. So it is funny to hear him just talk about, you're not getting paid shit. $5,000 is what I'll give you after we tax 2 of it.
But do you think it influences the outcome of the fight in any way? Did they suddenly have $5,000 to fight for?
I reckon this fight would have ended the same way, regardless if there was money on the line or not. But Joe, there's a clear
bloodthirst.
Joe, in practice in the UFC, there's some fighters that take that bonus thing. Like they clearly use that when they implement their game plans. And in some cases, we see a lot of guys these days who just fight idiotically and recklessly because they want that money.
Yeah, and there's also like, it's become this kind of, and I find it to be kind of gross on it. Not kind of, I find it to be gross. There's a thing where guys will have these wars and the first one in their mind will be, Dana, can we get to 50K? Like that gives you a perspective on where the UFC is still at all these years later. And yeah, there are definitely guys who kind of market themselves as being like, they're always in the bonuses. They're always getting fight of the night or finish of the night, which I mean, is cool in concept until you realize it's more like a necessity to make sure they make enough money from actually having fights in the biggest promotion in the world. It's bizarre. It's an example of saying they still battle all these years later. They still struggle with the idea that is it sport or entertainment, right? Because it's both, obviously, as we know. But there have been fighters throughout UFC history that have won a lot but done so in kind of a boring fashion, and the promotion has actively resented them for that, like pushback, hidden them away.
That's why Matt Lindland never got a title shot.
Right. I mean, like I wouldn't describe Mighty Mouse as boring, but because he didn't fit their mold of like how they promote fighters, they traded like one of the best fighters in the world. So
hilariously for Ben Askren,
actively
known banger.
Boring. Yes. Yeah. And of course with him it was more complicated. Mighty Mouse days, but John Fitch, you brought up earlier, John Fitch. They hated that John Fitch was winning fights because he was doing so in boring fashion. So it's all part of the way they kind of package it, and they'd rather you lose in entertainment fashion than win in boring fashion until you lose a couple of them, in which case you'll be released from the promotion and sent packing because, of course.
So it is fight time. We got our little stats. Bobby Southworth, 34, 8-3. Ludinson Cade, 31. That's a rough 31 at 16-3. I like gasped when they showed the canvas and how bare it was. Now it's, Dave and Buster's, Al's Tire Barn, Monster Energy, whatever they need to fucking. Do you remember, Steve, at this right after the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, when things started getting hot, a lot of guys were sponsored by condomdepot.com and would wear that on their gear?
As soon as you said bare canvas, immediately the words Condom Depot jumped into my head. Because I had been completely out of MMA for a good while before Ultimate Fighter. And at the finale, like a lot of the advertisements are back. Mm-hmm. And that was my first exposure to Condom Depot as a brand, was on the canvas on Spike TV. It's just, they were not getting the best. They were very much Ricky Bobby with me across the hood of the car.
Julio, this is a lot different now, but fighters were able to have independent sponsorships, and like they would wear, board shorts to fight in, and they would have just different sponsors on them. And Condom Depot was one of them. I remember Chris Lieben had in one fight something that said Pitbull Mortgage School, and I was just like, okay. If you go back and watch the decade that followed this, there's some pretty entertaining sponsorships, and guys used to get to wear like cool gear. Like Brandon Vera and Gray Maynard used to have really cool like boxing shorts, Muay Thai shorts, and then Dana White said, fuck that shit, everyone's going to wear the same stuff so I get all the money, which that story has a hilarious tie-in to when we get to the end of this in the retrospective. So dog ear that one. We'll circle back.
Did he give a big speech about why everybody had to wear the same kind of gear?
Dude, I believe it was around that time when they did the gear is when they had like the Zuffa or whatever, the company-wide summit where everyone who worked for the company had to go to like this fucking it was like a big business meeting, like a conference where they just went through like what the company's doing, where it's going to go. And it's a bunch of fucking meathead fighters. So one, there was pictures of a bunch of them sleeping at it. And then two, like there were like 2 or 3 fights that happened because do you remember this, Joe? Cyborg attacked that one girl who was talking shit about her.
I do, yeah. I vaguely remember it. This is where I start to fade out. The timeline that you're currently discussing is where I start to drop off some because, again, that's classic UFC, right? They want to be the most formal outfit in the world until it's time to actually grow up as a company. Otherwise, they'll be like the most trashy. I always think of, in that regard, the Conor McGregor Khabib build where they totally leaned into Conor's stuff. And if it was anyone else, it would be like, we are a serious promotion, guys. And it's like, no, you're not. You've never been a serious promotion. You have no intention of being one. It's just, that sums them up. Sounds like them.
God, Julio asking about the speech made me think of a scenario of Dana coming into a boardroom. Just be like, do you want to be a fucking sponsor?
I can't remember the name of this woman that was running her mouth about Cyborg, but then they both got to like this, fucking convention center in Daytona or whatever it was, and then Cyborg just went after and attacked her. It's like, what did you expect to happen?
Of course.
Putting a cat in a box of mice.
They're a serious promotion, though, Alex. They're very serious. I didn't know that about the UFC. Very, very serious. You should take them seriously. Like the NFL, you know that? NBA?
That no one but the UFC fighters train harder, and that's a fact.
That's a fact, yeah. We're going to get into slap fight in 20 years or so, but for now, the UFC is the one seed when it comes to professionalism in sports.
All right. It's fight time, baby. Referee presiding, the one and only Big John McCarthy. Julio, this is the guy who said, let's get it on. So if you ever hear that expression.
Is he the guy from, did they make a claymation thing in Celebrity Deathmatch? Is that him?
You're thinking of Mills Lane.
But that was his thing. He would say, let's get it on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was saying for the purposes of the Ultimate Fighting Championship.
Oh, well, okay. Edit my excitement out of this episode then.
Mills Lane's the guy who picked up the piece of Evander Holyfield's ear and took it to him. So here you go.
Measure of a man.
But I am proud that you know who Mills Lane is, so we got that. Big John McCarthy, me and my college buddies referred to lovingly as Juiced Ben Affleck, and then that was eventually shortened to JBA. So if I refer to him offhandedly as JBA at any point, that's what I'm referencing. Julio, you are our test subject here. They do nothing to explain the rules of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. What was your understanding of what was about to happen?
I mean, like we've covered, I've seen Warrior and I've seen Here Comes the Boom. So I knew like the basics of, you go, you fight, anything goes basically. But it was more of like, I guess I didn't expect it to be that much hugging. Is this like the average fight?
Especially them with the cage, guys would spend a lot of time on the fence in the clinch. And that was one of the elements that when Spike saw the fights, they were like, can we get rid of this part? Like, is this mandatory? Yeah, that's a bit, especially, Coach Randy Couture, that was where he spent most of his fights, right? With guys against the fence. Like, yeah. They didn't put that part in the highlight reels, interestingly enough, but it's a big part of the game, definitely.
Steve, it's apparent why Luden was terrified. When this fight starts, dude, Bobby looks legitimately 2 weight classes bigger than him.
Oh, it's nuts. He is. Looking at the heights at the announce as the entrance says, Bob is 6'2", Luden's 5'9".
Well,
he's probably got him by 22, 25 pounds at fight time. At one point, Bobby goes to shoot and Luden almost soccer kicks him right in the face.
Yes, I did take note of that. So that's illegal, Julio. That's an example of something that's illegal.
Oh, they call it out, right? Like the ref interferes and points it.
Yeah, JBA's like, cut that shit out.
Yeah.
JBA.
I think that
there was
the idea was that you learn on the fly for the audience. Like people like me, like, oh, as it happens, they're going to tell you what's allowed and what isn't allowed.
There's a hilarious example at UFC 43. This guy named Wes Sims just stood over Frank Mir, who was on the ground, and stomped him in the face repeatedly until he was basically unconscious, and then acted like he didn't know he broke the rules. It was fantastic.
Jesus Christ.
Wes Sims. There's another story for another day. My goodness.
So were you guys rooting for the underdog here once we got to the fight and you saw Bobby Southworth towering over his opponent? Or were you like, just make it quick?
Yeah, sometimes you know the score, and this is an example of a fight. There's plenty of these that happen in modern MMA too, where you're like, well, this is going to go one way most certainly. And rewatching this, I didn't have too much investment. I was just like, because it's so obvious, when you're watching and taking notes that Luden's just, if he could have, he would have run the other way. But,
Not according to the recaps from his teammates, and they're like, he put up a fight.
We need to start a ticker of how many times the word warrior is said in this show. Or warrior or heart. Speaking of heart, prior to the knockout, the most vicious thing that happens in this fight is that fucking Bobby lands a knee right to Luden's heart on a break, which looks like it just completely zapped his wind. We go one round, though. Luden lasts a round. And in between, we get to circle back to, which will most certainly become a bit on this, is Chuck Liddell being the worst corner man in the world. He's not giving any advice. It shows him, and he goes, Bobby, like this, whoop-ah! And he's like just throwing his hands. He's like a little kid, like, look what I can do. And then hilariously, Bobby wins with the tactic that Chuck was showing off, and Chuck's just standing there like, do that, and it fucking works because he comes out and immediately lands just a fucking 3-piece overhand right, left hook, straight right, and Luden Kincaid is wondering why Big John McCarthy's in his bedroom.
See, and all it would have taken was one of Kincaid's cornermen to glance over the other corner and see Chuck acting out the game plan. Hey, he just could have told, hey, watch for the overhand right. And he could have saved himself a lot of heartache.
So is this an artful finish? Like, as you guys as aficionados, like, was this, everything else aside, was it like a good finale to the match?
I actually thought this was, for whatever reason in my memory, the first round didn't happen and this was just the fight, was what we get in the second round. Because I do remember this is a pretty sweet combination here. Bobby's a good fighter, and that will, eventually we'll get to kind of his path. But yeah, the finish is nice. Luden actually is kind of respectful. He gets past the first round. He doesn't really get any offense off, but he kind of just hangs in there. And I think they were hoping that Bobby would tire, which obviously we didn't get that far to find out. But it's a sweet combination, definitely.
Aesthetically pleasing. If you go back and watch like the original UFCs, there's a lot of finishes and knockouts in that look like two men just got thrown into a dryer and they turned it on. But this is, it's clear some of these dudes have some skills.
Yeah.
So Luden's out. He's eliminated. Hit the bricks. Good thing he got rid of all his shit the night before. So he's gone. To recap episode 3, Making Weight of The Ultimate Fighter, Alex Schonauer wins the light heavyweight challenge. Bobby Southworth comes in last and is forced to fight in an elimination bout. Team Liddell chooses Luden Kincaid to fight Southworth. Southworth cuts 20 pounds in 24 hours with the help of Josh Koscheck and Liddell. Southworth describes the weight cut as pure hell, but then goes on to defeat Ludus and Cade by KO at 12 seconds of the second round. Gentlemen, the fights have begun, and it's only up from here.
I will say this, after building this whole episode around weight cutting and making Bobby look like he was going through absolute hell, it really showed just how effective of a strategy it is, because when he came into the cage fully replenished,
He just kicked his
it was a no
arms.
contest.
Yeah.
Like, after making him look like he was going to die the day before, as soon as he quit fucking around in the second round and just came out ready to fight, it was a wrap.
If we wanted to be generous, we would say that was like artful editing. You know, like, we're going to show them why cutting weight is important. I don't believe for a second that's the case. They just stumbled into that. But you're right.
Yes.
He completely reveals why he does it. So, yeah, that's a good call.
So as we leave episode 3, the green team is down bad. They're losing people left and right. The blue team continues on their path of victory.
Does this make Liddell a better coach than Couture?
Definitely not, which makes it funnier.
Thank you for listening to this episode of TUFtwenty. A reminder to subscribe to the podcast, visit wearethecontrarians.com, and follow the Contrarians across social media at Contrarian Prime.
You can also follow Alex individually at Contrarian Alex, and you can check out our other special projects on our Patreon channel at patreon.com/Contrarian Prime. If you want to listen to Alex teach me about The Rock and John Cena, that's where you need to go.
You can catch me weekly on the Late Night Grin, live and free on YouTube every Friday night. In addition, Alex and I collaborate monthly on Grin Grappler, discussing some of pro wrestling's biggest and baddest. If those grins are for you, check out LNG Gold, our YouTube membership plan that includes over 50 hours of exclusive content each month.
You can follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at NotDrDeath. That's NotDrDeath. Or you can block me now and save us both a lot of embarrassment.
Until next time, be sure to make your coaches proud and don't call anyone a fatherless bastard.